Karen still wasn't buying it. She came out yelling, accusing me of trying to sabotage her property. But right in the middle of her rant, the ground let out this low groan, like something deep underground was tearing apart. The slope under her koi pond gave a sudden jolt, and that's when I knew it was only a matter of time. As the ground shifted beneath Karen's koi pond, everything froze. You could hear the silence between the cracks, like the earth was holding its breath. Then, without warning, part of the retaining wall collapsed. Water from the pond came rushing down the slope, mixing with the sewage runoff that had already destroyed my yard. Karen screamed, but even then, she still blamed *me*, said I had tampered with the hill to make her look bad. But what happened next changed everything. The city inspector, who had been quietly surveying the area, called in a geotech crew. They arrived within hours and started drilling near the base of the slope. That's when they uncovered something no one expected, an old, improperly sealed storm drain that hadn't been used in decades. It ran directly underneath both our properties, and it was collapsed in multiple places. Turns out, when Karen built that fancy koi pond and expanded her patio, they had unknowingly poured tons of weight onto the weakened underground system. The pressure, combined with weeks of rainfall and the leaking sewer line, had turned the entire slope into a ticking time bomb. But here's where it got worse. Records show that the HOA was warned about the aging infrastructure years ago, and guess who signed off on ignoring the repairs to cut costs? Yep, Karen herself, and now that decision was coming back faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours of the geotech crew's discovery, the entire slope was flagged as a danger zone. Emergency crews roped off the area, and city engineers moved in with equipment to stabilize the ground. Karen was furious, pacing around her driveway, yelling at anyone who would listen. But the real shock came when a city official handed her a notice. Her house was being marked uninhabitable until further inspection. She stood there stunned, clutching the paper like it was a mistake, but it wasn't. Then came the sinkhole. It opened just after midnight. I heard this deep cracking sound, followed by a low rumble. When I looked out the window, her backyard was gone. Part of her mansion, the entire rear section, had sunk into the ground like it was never there. The koi pond, the patio, even that expensive stonework just vanished. The next morning, crews found that the collapsed storm drain had created a hollow space under her foundation. The years of ignored maintenance, the overloaded slope, the sewage leaks, it all came together in the worst way possible. And the HOA, they started scrambling to cover their tracks. But it was too late. Here's the twist though, when digging out the collapsed area, workers found pipes and wiring that weren't in the city's plans. Unpermitted construction. Karen had extended her home illegally years ago, right over the weakest part of the hill. Turns out, the real disaster wasn't just natural. It was built that way. As for me, the city finally repaired the main sewer line and covered the damage to my yard, labeling it an infrastructure failure. Neighbors who had stayed quiet started speaking up, and together, we pushed for a complete overhaul of the HOA's leadership. The mood in the community changed. People finally felt like they had a voice again. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted my backyard back. But what happened here was a reminder. When people in power cut corners and ignore the truth, the consequences don't stay buried forever. Sometimes they rise up through the dirt, or, in this case, the sewage. Thanks for watching, and trust me, check your drains, and always document everything. In the weeks that followed, everything started coming to light. The city launched a full investigation into the HOA's handling of the sewer line, and Karen's role was front and center. Turns out she'd been bypassing permits and ignoring safety reports for years, all to save money and boost her property value. But in the end, that shortcut cost her everything. Her mansion was condemned, insurance refused to cover the damages due to the unpermitted work, and she was removed from the HOA board completely. As for me, the city finally repaired the main sewer line and covered the damage to my yard, labeling it an infrastructure failure. Neighbors who had stayed quiet started speaking up, and together, we pushed for a complete overhaul of the HOA's leadership. The mood in the community changed. People finally felt like they had a voice again. You're not gonna believe what just happened to me. So I've been dealing with this nightmare of a situation involving my HOA, and more specifically, one of the board members who everyone around here secretly calls Karen. She's the kind of person who makes you triple-check your mailbox just to avoid running into her. For weeks, I've been noticing this awful smell creeping into my backyard. At first, I thought maybe something died back there or the drains were clogged. But then one rainy morning, I looked outside and realized my entire backyard was flooding with what turned out to be sewage. Actual sewage. I tried everything, calls, complaints, even offered to fix it myself. But Karen brushed it off, saying it was a natural drainage issue. Natural. My yard smelled like a public restroom, and she wouldn't lift a finger. What she didn't realize, though, was that ignoring it would come back to bite her hard. Because while I was stuck dealing with the mess, something was brewing right under her massive mansion on the hill. Cracks started showing near her driveway, and then the ground just dropped. I'm talking about a sinkhole, a real one. And you'll never guess what caused it, or how everything came crashing down, literally and metaphorically. Let's just say karma doesn't knock, it crashes in. Now, to really understand how things got to this point, you need to know what dealing with Karen has been like. She's not just any HOA board member. She basically acts like she owns the entire neighborhood. The type who'll send you a violation notice because your trash can was visible for 5 minutes too long. So when the sewage started backing up into my yard, I knew bringing it up to her wouldn't go smoothly. And I was right. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe if you took better care of your property, this wouldn't be happening." But here's the thing, I'd already paid to have plumbers come out. Twice. They told me the problem wasn't on my side. It was coming from the main line that runs underneath the slope between our houses. That's when it hit me. Karen's house sits at the top of that slope. Her home is huge, custom-built, with all the fancy landscaping and stonework. But if the main sewer line was cracked underneath her property, that meant everything was draining straight downhill, right into my yard. Still, she refused to believe it. Said the board had no record of any issues, and unless I had proof, they weren't going to take action. But nature doesn't wait for paperwork, and that slope, it was starting to shift. A few days later, I started noticing new cracks along the side of my patio. At first, I thought it was just wear and tear from the water damage, but then the soil around the edge looked like it was sinking. I recorded everything, videos, photos, even drone shots, because at this point, I felt like I was in some kind of slow-motion disaster movie. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She called a special HOA meeting, and instead of addressing the issue, she accused me of damaging the property line, said I was spreading rumors and trying to stir up drama in the community. But I wasn't the only one having problems. A couple neighbors down the street reached out quietly, saying they'd started smelling the same sewage odor and seeing pooling water after rain. One guy had a basement leak for the first time in 10 years. But nobody wanted to speak up. They were afraid of getting on Karen's bad side. That's how much control she had over the HOA. Still, something felt off. I kept digging, figuratively, not literally, and found out that a drainage inspection that was supposed to happen months ago never got scheduled. Emails were lost, paperwork mysteriously delayed, and yet, Karen had just installed a brand new koi pond and redone her retaining wall, right over the area where the main sewer line ran. Coincidence? I didn't think so. Things took a serious turn the night of that heavy storm, the kind of rain that rattles your windows and makes the whole ground feel like it's pulsing. I barely slept, kept checking the backyard every hour with a flashlight, just watching the water rise again. Except this time, it wasn't just water. The smell was unbearable, and I could see actual sewage bubbling up through the ground. It was like the earth itself was sick. By morning, my backyard looked like a swamp, but what caught my eye wasn't the mess. It was the slope leading up to Karen's house. There was this long, dark crack running down the side of her retaining wall. Something was shifting under there, and it wasn't subtle anymore. I called the city. Again. I showed them every bit of evidence I'd collected: photos, videos, the plumber's reports. Finally, they sent someone out to inspect, and when the guy walked the slope and saw the crack, his face went pale. He made a call right there on the spot, said something about soil movement and subsurface erosion caused by a possible main line breach.